Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shoes with me, Kevin Britz, proudly powered by leadershipbydesign.co, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me in today's leadership and coaching segment, co-owner and director of Raintree Business Coaching, Leoni Coetzee. How are you doing, Leoni?
I'm good, thanks, Kevin. How are you?
Good. And thank you for being back in 2024. Like the last time I think I saw you guys on the show was last year, and it's been a whirlwind of things happening in the year. And I'm like, we're already in February, right?
So that's okay. We're almost closing. Yeah, almost closing February. Like, what happened?
Yeah. So I mean, for those who have been following the show and know, that we've partnered up, Raintree Business Coaching and I have partnered up in very many conversations already. And last year we covered the work and industry neutral growth skills in quite depth, unpacking, what that is and looking, how to create creativity, critical thinking, social intelligence, self management and attention management, and really getting our brains wrapped around that. What does that mean for environments? But today we're moving in support of that conversation. So, they lend really well or lean really well off each other, are the quotients, the importance of quotients that we find, in business. And when we first chatted about this, what's interesting about this is, we understood that there's more to business than just systems and processes and people. When you start to find, especially in leadership, right? So anyone in a leadership capacity and anyone in leading in a leading role, dealing with humans, at the end of the day, we have quotients that we can tap into and we need to start being aware of. What for you stood out about this conversation about the quotients, and why do you think it's an important factor? I mean, because you guys, you work with large corporates, you do extensive amounts of business coaching in any case. Why do you think this is an appealing conversation?
And you've mentioned it, that it links so nicely with the conversations that we've had around the wings, that's really stemmed from stepping into the world where artificial intelligence is really at the forefront. And how important it is for us, especially as leaders, to be able to lean into our humanity, lean into our human skills. And the quotients for me really stood out again. And that's why we thought, let's unpack the quotients this year, and really see how we can support leaders in business to be able to get really fit at these skills as leaders, to really support their businesses and to support their people, and to take their businesses to the next level. And that's why it's really an important conversation for me to have. And it's also just the work that we love, right? It's the stuff that we do most of the time.
It's what we do. And just to touch on them, so we know that EQ is the obvious one. We've heard a lot about that. Sorry, but we have emotional intelligence, we have social intelligence, we have adaptive intelligence, strategic intelligence, digital intelligence, ethical intelligence, and spiritual intelligence. But for us, we're going to be breaking this down into segment chunk pieces, so we can unpack it, on a because I mean they are big topics to sort of unpack. And IQ is the obvious one, and it's the go-to for a lot of people. Like, what is your IQ? And I don't think a lot of people consider that much anymore, because there are so many things to consider. But in today's conversation, we're going to be chatting about EQ, and a lot of people, people know, and I think it's almost become a tick box exercise to say, you need to have empathy, and you need to be a well-versed emotional leader, and you need to be able to do that. But I think it's become watered down to a certain degree, and people don't recognize the importance of what being an emotionally intelligent leader even means, right? And I know that we made some notes. Like the first one, recognizing the emotion, and I think that's so important, right? So What stands out about that to you? Because I know that we were discussing before the show now, like when you have that kind of emotional moment, and it can be so overwhelming, but it's in the recognition that you actually start gaining more control of what's happening with your environment and your approach to leadership.
Yeah, so this one is a very important one, is the recognition. And I see this often in business, where the challenges that we are having as business people and colleagues working with one another, or leaders, is we're in certain situations, things are being said, and we get triggered.
Yeah.
And because we get triggered, we respond, or we react in a very unconscious way, which is this, and then the naming and the shaming and the blaming and the finger pointing start happening, and not realizing actually what is really going on in that situation. And this is where the recognition is so important, where we can become in that self-awareness, where we can pause in that moment and we can recognize what is the emotion, which then brings us to the next level, is the understanding, right, of that emotion. But first level is the recognition and the taking ownership. Because the fact of the matter is that other people cannot make you feel in a certain way, even though we believe they can. The reality is that we always have the choice as to how we're going to react or how we're going to respond to a certain situation or incident. But if we are not aware, if we're not able to recognize our own emotions, we can't manage it. And then we become and we remain reactive. And when we are in that state of being reactive, this is really a place where we can't, as leaders, stand out, manage difficult conversation, have really difficult conversations. We can't be real and authentic. We can't own our stuff. There's as leaders, there are just so many aspects of working with people, whether it's stakeholders or colleagues or clients, or team members. If we're not able to recognize and own our own emotions.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, when you say, we triggered, as an Enneagram practitioner, I mean, this, and this is what you also teach, it's the understanding and recognizing what is that emotion that is your trigger point. Because emotional intelligence doesn't say you mustn't have an emotion.
Yeah.
It's the ability to understand that you're having an emotion, and to become curious about the emotion, to interrogate the emotion, to understand, why is this, triggering me to the degree it's triggering me? Because that moves us to the next understanding conversation of, like, so I see that I'm feeling a certain way. And what's interesting, I don't know what the program's called right now, but Brené Brown does, she does a show. She actually did an actual TV series where she investigates emotions and the words that we use for emotions. And one of the things that she discovered through her research was there are certain emotions that we feel as humans that we don't actively or specifically understand how to verbalize. So, to a degree, you might be feeling irritated, but it's a sense of sadness that you have. You might be feeling, so until you really want to, until you have the EQ to really investigate what that thing is, what is that root cause that you're actually uncovering, it will just be your fumbling block and a stumbling block that you fumble over every time.
I love, and thank you for reminding me of it, because it's such an important point here, is that we have to recognize the emotion. It belongs. It has a purpose. It is there to tell you something. Because so often, and especially in the workplace, we try to push it away. We try to ignore it. We try to contain it. And in the work that we do, what we learn is it's like trying to cut off one of your arms, but it's a part of you, and when you try to ignore it or push it away, it's like, trying to, if I say to you, Kevin, don't think about chocolate, stop thinking about chocolate, you actually give it power. Now you really want chocolate. And in the same way, if there are emotions that we are trying to suppress, trying to ignore, trying to push away, it actually becomes stronger and we give it more power. And that's where it builds and it builds and it builds. And you know, when we speak that language about someone has snapped and it then comes to where if you do pause and you eyeball it, like we always say, right? You go look at the emotion, you see what is it telling you? I had such a beautiful example of sitting with a young person last week, and what showed up was anger. Right? She was angry with the world, and angry with the people in the world, and she was fighting, and she was really in that aggression kind of space. And when we started looking at it and we kind of dug a little bit deeper, what we realized was the anger was just masking the real emotion. And the real emotion here, she was really panicking and worrying. She was in anxiety. And once we realized it was actually anxiety, we were able to go and identify what was causing the anxiety. And when she was able to identify the cause of the anxiety, she was able to put a place and plan to get rid of the stuff that was making her anxious, and she could put things to bed and close things off. And the anxiety released, and of course then the anger released as well. You know, but that anger was kind of the flag that went off. Hang on, pause, there's something going on. I need your attention. Please put your attention on me. And that's the gift of emotional intelligence. When we get fit at noticing and really pausing and looking and dissecting and analyzing to really get fit at understanding all these various type of emotions that's going on, because often, you know, anger can show up, or worry, anxiety can show up, but the deeper cause is something else. And sometimes, you know, we need someone to just support us in that conversation, which is why we work with coaches, right? But getting fit at recognizing the emotions when they show up and what they are telling me is just so valuable for us as leaders in the workplace. And like you say, it's then to be able to go and understand them, and then ultimately to be able to go onto the managing them. But if we avoid them, if we don't look at them, we try to push them away, it's where we actually give them more power.
Yeah, and you know, I always refer to them as indicators. Your emotions are your indicators to your body, your body's language. You know, so when it's indicating something to you, are you aware of what it's indicating? And if you're not comfortable with it, then sit with it. You know, journal about it. Speak to a friend, speak to a coach, whatever you need to do, but don't ignore it. You know, it's an indicator trying to tell you something. But part of this conversation is, you know, unpacking and categorizing, you know, 5 critical areas for emotional intelligence, and like recognition falls smack bang into the self-awareness, like we've just been speaking about now. I think self-regulation is the next one, which is a really important one, because, you know, I always go back to this, the Oprah conversation, saying part of what you need to realize about your energy that you bring to a moment is that you are 100% responsible to the energy that you bring to this moment. And if you don't take responsibility to that degree, you're just going to blame someone, or you're going to, you know, experience a moment that you don't necessarily want to, right? So you kind of have to be able to self-regulate yourself and understand. So what is required of me to pull this thing off? What is required of my being and my emotion to kind of step into whatever that is that you're stepping into? And sometimes you're going to need to prime yourself and prime your brain, and, you know, do a bit of breathing, do a bit of running up the stairs, get a bit more excited, or do some power posing, whatever that's required of the moment. But you have to be able to know what self-regulation looks like, because if you don't, I remember doing this, and you would know this from your background as well, is stepping out on stage, kind of, you know, when you're just about to go and sing, and you think, I've done the show 100 times, I know how to do it, and then you don't kind of prime your brain to successfully, like, you know, showcase yourself to the audience. And as I step out, my brain sees there's 500 like people sitting in an audience, and suddenly your body goes through this immediate shock, and your mouth dries up, and then I couldn't sing properly, and it was just such a snowball. And I remember, self-regulate, Kevin, like even if it takes you like 30 seconds, 2 minutes just before you hit the stage, make sure you bring the energy to the moment, because if you don't, your body's going to go, what the hell are you doing? You're standing up in front of all these people on a microphone and you're about to sing. Like,
are you crazy?
Yeah, I mean, and that's just a small practical example, but all of these instances happen, when you're presenting, or when you're doing a show on a podcast, or when you're, all of these moments that we have, we don't self-regulate enough, because we take our moments and our emotions for granted to that degree. And obviously I'll be fine, and then you realize, oh, maybe I'm not fine, and I put my foot in my mouth. But it's because you don't self-regulate, right? And we have to be able to see it as the key critical part of unpacking emotional intelligence.
And it's so, I love this example that you've given. It also so strongly goes hand in hand for me with the self-awareness, because once we are able to own our emotions, instead of blaming other people, but he said this and she did this, and because of that person that did this thing, I am responding or feeling this way. What we are indirectly doing there is you're giving away your power, and then you can't self-regulate because you're not taking ownership. Once you take ownership, in this situation, I reacted in this way, and this is why I reacted in this way. Okay, I'm taking ownership of that. Now I can work with that, because now it's my emotions that I'm working. That's with to support me to self-regulate. And yes, there are so many tools out there to support us to be able to self-regulate with the things that are tricky for us. I know someone, for example, that really struggles with anxiety. So there were certain things that and certain tips and tools that he does that supports him through that anxiety, so that he can work through it and be able to show up. Because in the past, he used to try and suppress it, and then he got paralyzed and he completely froze. And utilizing the tools, becoming aware of what is causing that anxiety, and then having the tools to be able to self-regulate, and all of us have got different things and different emotions and different things that triggers us, to becoming aware, and then learning the tips and the tools, so that we can stand up in front of, like you say, that 2 minutes before the time where you get your mind ready to go show up and with a microphone in front of 500 people. If you don't self-regulate, you will fail. You will freeze up. But like you say, in the same way, when we are going in life, in our various work situations, when we take ownership of our responsibilities, of our emotions, we can self-regulate.
Absolutely. Another one that they mention is motivation, and I always use this example for motivation, because it was an extrinsic point of motivation that I used, and I got Sun International as one of my clients, and I was so excited. I was like, oh wow, and in my head it was this external achievement, and they flew me down to Cape Town, and I was doing training for them, and it was in my head I built up this whole big motivation, this would be the thing, right? And I arrived in my hotel room, and I sat on the bed, and I was like, I mean, they even arrived at the airport with a board, my name on the board, and it was I was so wow, this is so, I'm doing great work here, and I'm achieving. And I got to the hotel room, sat on the bed, and I was like, oh wow, that's such a letdown. I was so let down by myself, because I created this external kind of reason, and all of those boxes were ticked, and and I was like, okay, then what does that mean? And when that moment happened, I immediately realized that I need to understand what is my intrinsic motivation for what I get, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? So motivation for me, from an EQ standpoint, it's always and only ever an internal kind of job. Everything in my life right now is really an internalized, because when you really grasp the essence of why are you doing this? Like, what is motivating you to do it in the first place? Like, why is it important to be able to self-regulate and have the awareness and be emotionally intelligent? What's the point, right? And the point is, the better you do it, the better your relationships are. The more you step and lean into your emotional intelligence, the easier it is to navigate life and navigate people and situations. And because life happens, stress happens, and that's not always comfortable. But the moment you understand it from an internalized motivation and the reason why you want to do this and become this person, I think then it becomes so much easier to support EQ in any case.
Yeah, I always call that the bigger picture, right? If we're able to see the bigger picture, it's the thing that can keep us on track. It's something that no one can take away from us. Like the example of sitting there in the hotel. And I was looking at it because the hotels are such a letdown. And it's like,
yeah,
right. But when it's you've got that bigger picture. It comes from yourself. It's something someone can't take away from you, and it's really helping us to navigate those little nigglies that happens on the road, and that keeps on trying to drag us off the path that we're on. It helps us to stay on track. But being internally motivated is not always easy.
No.
And it's, we have to recognize that, and I personally believe it takes a lot of work. For me, for example, the second it comes to exercise, I know I'm not internally referenced here. I need external support because I haven't built up the muscle power yet to keep myself on track. Any excuse to not drag myself off the gym, I'm going to grab it. And I'm working continuously, curiously exploring at what is that internal motivation that, if my gym buddies for some reason doesn't want to go, that I don't use that excuse to also not to go. But I can keep myself on track. But it's, that big picture is so important for us. Why are we doing something? Why is this important enough for us? It's what keeps us on track. Yeah.
Another one is empathy, and empathy is an interesting one because I think because you and I, because we do the work we do, it's a natural kind of position that we have to position ourselves because intention and behavior is not the same thing, or not always. Sometimes your intention is to say the right thing and your behavior does a whole other thing, and sometimes your intention matches your behavior. But when you come from empathy, you immediately move into like stepping into someone's shoes. And that's how I kind of see it, because half the time when people make decisions or you find yourself in a difficult situation, you kind of go, this is alarming, and why would you do that, and why is this happening, and all the whys come up. But if you stop for a second and kind of just take the root of empathy, you kind of go, okay, so if I was in his shoes or her shoes, why do you think that person would have made that decision? And immediately when you do it and you come from an empathic position, your reasoning, your questioning, your frame changes, right? And that's what's beautiful for me around empathy, because it's an obvious go-to kind of position to start with.
Yeah, and I believe also very specifically for leaders, it's having that balance, right? Because as leaders, we constantly need to navigate what's important for the business, plus looking at the human beings, our people that work for us and work with us, and getting that balance right. Because sometimes it's not about feeling sorry for someone. Having empathy doesn't mean I feel sorry and I shame. It's not what it is. It's being able to empathize with that person and still being able to discern and make the right decision for the business without being an absolute in the process, and taking your people with you and looking after them, right? Sorry, that one slipped out.
No.
But I've
But
seen so many times how leaders are just really, it's all about the business and all about the money and all about the profits and not being able to empathize and looking after their biggest asset, which is their people that works for them. Yeah, sorry. Kevin.
Sorry. Oh my goodness, that was so funny. I think we're just going to leave that in the show. No, but I think it is, because when you don't come from that position, you end up being a complete. You kind of go, okay, so why the hell are you taking this stance, right? You're the representation of who we're supposed to follow. And leaders don't always have the answers, admittedly, right? But also have the intelligence and have the ability to recognize that you don't have the answers. And if you don't, kind of go, God, I absolutely don't know what to do right now, right? And because that in itself, and I think that speaks about your self-awareness and your self-regulation. And, what is motivating this in any case? It's not ego. It's a case of going, well, what is the bigger picture here? And can I step into that so that I don't become in the conversation? And, I can lean in and kind of go, okay, I don't know what the answer is. And how do we unpack it and be vulnerable and authentic enough to take that position?
And that links to that last piece, which is our social skills, right? Where we can sit in the room and be real and be vulnerable and be authentic with our team and with our people, and then lean into all of our abilities to solve together, to collaborate, to find answers, and to be empathetic, and bringing all of these beautiful emotional intelligence skills together for the greater good of all. And that's where leaders then really start excelling, because now they are taking people with them.
Yeah, and and this is where I know that I think I'm not too bad at my EQ, and I'm not too bad at my social skills either, because very often you'll find when you're in an environment, or if I go to a new client, or then people warn you that, oh, Leoni's difficult, like she's got a temper, and they kind of preface that. They like, oh, be careful for this one or be careful for that one. And immediately I'm kind of my immediate position to that is like, well, they don't know me and you don't know me. So how about you just let me handle it? And when I do that, invariably, I never have an issue, because I have the ability to kind of be empathetic towards a situation, to self-regulate, to come from a position of like seeing a different frame and a different position, and kind of see if this person is bad-tempered, or for whatever reason they show up as difficult. I have the social skills and social ability to kind of see, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why you would choose to show up that way. And I think very often leaders don't see that. They kind of go, you're just being an idiot. You're just being difficult. You're just being whatever. But you don't take that social skill ability and kind of go for the group's sake. What is best for our sake? And who do I need to be for our sake in this moment, so that we, as the leader in this environment, get the best out of what it is we're doing here? And I think that's why social skills is so important to add to your emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I think it's, for us as leaders in business, I think it's probably one of the most important ones, because you're not a leader if you're on your own. You need to be people being with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's our conversation for today. We're already run out of time. So just, and you were all serious about this conversation though. But I mean,
like, what are we going to say?
But guys, just to give you those 5, the important critical areas is self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Those 5 core critical areas that you can support emotional intelligence with, that is what's going to guide you into really stepping into your emotional intelligence far more. Guys, she's one of the directors and one of the directors and co-owner of Raintree Business Coaching. Leoni Coetzee, thank you for joining me, and I will chat to you soon.
Love it. Thank you so much, Kevin. See you soon.
Cheers for now. Bye.
Bye-bye.